In this episode, I am sitting down with Emily Luk, CEO and co-founder of Plenty, which has designed the first platform for couples with finances in mind. Think about how much money do you need to have a child? What exactly do your finances need to look like before you consider buying a house? How much should you save for a wedding, if you want that at all? Emily's platform, Plenty, answers all of these questions and so much more without the high cost of a financial planner. Now, Emily has a background in wealth management, and so she is bringing this first of its kind application to the industry, wealth management for couples. And with 65% of millennial couples partnering up, honestly, it's more relevant than ever before. Emily explains her journey to developing Plenty and what she hopes will be the start of a greater future for wealth management and access to all types of people and couples. So I am so excited for you to hear more about Emily, her journey as a woman in fintech, as a new entrepreneur and founder in the fintech space, and all of the twists and turns that come with that journey to building Plenty. All right. Enjoy this episode. Well, Emily Luk, co-founder and CEO of Plenty, thank you so much for joining me on Humans of Fintech, and thank you for coming into the studio here in Brooklyn, Williamsburg specifically.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to get to learn more about you and Plenty, which is what's the one-liner for Plenty? Well, how do you describe it?
The place where couples can invest and plan for their future together.
Oh, gosh, I love that. Well, I mean, my partner is watching us as we record this, so this should be a treat. But first and foremost, you are a human of fintech. Mm-hmm. Please connect the dots for us a little bit about how you found your sense of belonging and purpose in the fintech space.
Yeah, so my journey actually started, I went to a high school in downtown Toronto, and we were a couple blocks away from Bay Street, the Canadian version of Wall Street. So from 12 onwards, I was right around the streets where you'd see, the suits with the briefcases. And I was always so curious what they did when they went to the big banking towers. And I always had that kind of seed in the back of my mind. I was really lucky. I had an internship when I was in university, and I ended up getting a mentor there at PwC. And I told him, I was like, I want to go into the world of nonprofits and healthcare and all these places where I can help people. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you move really quickly. I actually think you're going to really enjoy working in tech. And at the time, he was like, it's information technology. And I was like, oh, that's such an old school name. But what he meant was software.
Yeah.
And so he introduced me to someone who would actually eventually go on to be my boss. And he was, he worked at a venture firm. And so I got my start off in the tech world, working in venture. And I started off at the age of 20 there. That fund ended up actually investing in a lot of fintech companies. So I ended up having the chance to see a lot of companies that were Canadian companies expanding into the US market or already were in the US market. So that was really my introduction. But where I really got immersed was in 2015 when I had the opportunity to join Stripe, and they were just starting to build out their business and growth team. And so I had this opportunity to join them in San Francisco. I decided to pack everything up in Toronto and then moved on over. And at the time, we didn't even have titles really at the time. So it was a much earlier stage of the company. But then I really had the chance to fall in love with fintech because there was just so much complexity there.
Well, and you loved tech, at least your mentor had seen that. And I mean, he may have not realized it at the time, but really the short answer there is that you were like, I want to be able to help people and do something like a nonprofit or do something that betters the world while also being interested in, tech and finance. And, so he was just like, fintech is the thing that will do that. But that's really cool. And I think that it's like important to share that because people, I think, especially maybe the more consumer audience doesn't always connect wanting to do good with the fintech space, but I'm really working on making that story more known.
Well, I think money is just such a personal thing, and it can have such an impact on someone's life. So absolutely. And then through tech, it really is. And the way that my mentor had framed it to me at the time was, this is one way that you can scale your impact far beyond the amount of hours you're spending. So it's not as much as like, sometimes with medicine, it's the number of hours you have is the number of patients you can see. Whereas with tech, there's really the ability to scale far, far beyond the number of hours that you've put in.
Gosh. Okay, that's really good advice. You got a top tier mentor there. We love that, and also this the importance of mentorship. But okay, so you find your way into fintech. You're at Stripe, and Stripe. So Stripe, kind of like Plaid, it makes me think of one of my fellow guests, Helen Min. I mean, she had said how working at those companies is like going to FinTech University 101 at the early stages. Does that sentiment feel right for you?
Absolutely. So when I was actually in venture, I started off with doing my CPA designation. I also started the first 2 levels of the CFA designation, and then I actually finished my last CFA level when I was actually at Stripe. And if I compare what I learned through both like those 2 designations versus at Stripe was like deep immersion into everything fintech. And the beauty of it was they had this policy of transparency where you could really easily understand what every single team in the whole company was doing. So we had email transparency and also this practice of having meeting notes. So anybody could follow along, which I did. Like every month I would pick a theme. So I'd follow along like the legal team for a month and read all of the notes from every meeting they had that month. Then I'd think about the partnerships team. Then I think about the compliance team and the risk team. And so there was an ability to kind of understand all these different parts of the company really easily. And then if I compare that to, the CPA and the CFA, that's actually much more technical. It's almost like, how do these instruments work? Or like, how does this tax work? But it wasn't really about how the industry worked, which is so much of what I was able to do and see at Stripe.
Right. And I think that's also an important message to put out there that, fintech is incredibly technical. Don't get me wrong. I'm still trying to I explain things, and my performance coach / life partner / Anton over here is like, you can't say things like that. No one knows what you're talking about. But I was like, this is the most simplified way I could say it. And he's like, nope, no audience is still gonna understand. Yeah. And but I bring that up because it's like, it is so technical, but even we have to put the narrative out there that it is still very much for people that are interested in these greater picture, solving bigger problems of the world, right? I mean, economic equity being, I think, our chosen cause for the most part.
Absolutely. I think there's so much of knowledge that it's actually more complicated than it needs to be. And I think it would benefit so many people if finance and financial concepts were just explained in a way that was accessible to anybody. And I actually think that's so much of the role and so much of what I've seen with your work as well, which is making it accessible so it doesn't seem scary, so people don't feel like it's something they can't understand. Right. And especially for why even Plenty exists, so much of it is, hey, you can understand this. You don't need to go pay someone thousands of dollars when actually you're not that far away from doing it yourself.
Right. Well, and people just need that extra nudge, I think, generally. And even if you're in the industry, even if you're in fintech and working in fintech, it can still feel, finance, technology, all of these things. It's, I think, one of the most common probably misconceptions about me to a consumer audience would be that I'm like a personal finance expert. Let me just say it right now, I'm not. So I'm still trying to figure it out along with my partner. But, I'm a woman managing my financial independence while trying to build a media company or am building one. And, and it's still difficult, even having all of the knowledge of the industry. When did you kind of, I guess, pinpoint that couples were an opportunity for the fintech space, or at least wealth management for couples?
Yeah, so really there were 2 moments, one that was seeded long before Plenty, and then one that was really the catalyst for Plenty. So when I mentioned that I had the opportunity to go to this high school that was downtown, I actually had the opportunity to also attend university classes. So when I was 15, I actually took this course by this economist that just talked about population demographics. And he actually was the economist for the government of Canada to help them think about policy that matched the number of people, the demographics of the population, all the different cultures, the ages, the genders, and make sure that policy actually matches where the citizens are. And I love that. Yeah. And, it's like, I really loved learning about that because it explained so many things to me. It felt like that was actually a really core part of why the world is the way it is. And as I think about some of the biggest generational trends that we are in right now, if you think about the millennial generation, they're the second largest generation in North America. And they're entering they're right around mid 20s to early 40s. And they're entering this time where actually very rapidly they're partnering up. And actually almost 65% of this generation is partnered up. What is
wow.
Yeah, they are. And it's something that people actually might not even realize, but especially this year, there's 5 million people getting married this year alone. And so that's also not even just people who are, getting into long-term partnerships, moving in together. And so one of the things specifically about that is the unique thing about our generation, though, that unlike generations before us, is more than 80% of couples are both working. And so when both people are working, actually, there's built-in independence because they both have a source of income. And there's also a source of, but we still want to do things together. And so we actually started thinking about the space that Plenty was in, actually, long before we got engaged, but really after Channing and I, my co-founder, we got engaged, we realized we're like, wait, why are there no products and how is there no easy way to feel like we're combining togetherness, but also maintaining some independence? It's almost like that Esther Perel paradox, of mystery and togetherness, right? But it's the same thing with money, I think. It's like, I want to still feel independent. I want to still feel like I am part of the answer and I know what's going on. But I also want to feel like we're together and we can rely on each other and we're doing this as a team.
Wait, so when did you and your fiance meet?
So we met working together at actually the startup that we were both at before we built Plenty.
Okay.
And so it was a startup that I went to right after Stripe named Even. And Even is now acquired by Walmart and One. And so that was acquired about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago at this point. And Even was really focused on people who were helping people who are living paycheck to paycheck reach a point of financial stability. And so we had, budgeting, automatic savings, which was one of the products that Channing worked on. Actually, a bunch of the goals-based insights that we have now in Plenty came from that.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then we also had the earliest version of earned wage access.
Okay. Amazing. So you meet at this other startup, it gets acquired, and then you take some time to, rest, soul search, all the things. And then during that time is when kind of the idea of Plenty came up, when you two decided to, eventually get married and all of that. And I mean, I guess you realized that it could really be something. How had the transition to an actual product start to really look like?
Yeah, so we ended up taking about a year to go travel together. Because we knew that whatever we did next, we'd be spending a lot of time just fully investing in that and weren't sure the next time we'd both be able to take time off. So we spent about a year traveling, actually in the middle of COVID too, and went, all across North America, parts of Europe, to the Caribbean. And it started off kind of old school J.K. Rowling-esque, on a napkin. And we were sitting in Europe at a cafe, and we just had a piece of paper and we were like, what if we could just answer a question about our lives, like how much we want for a house and how much do kids cost and how much we need to make in order to support the lifestyle we want? How do we answer all these questions? And we just started sketching this out on a napkin. And at first it started off as just being, this is just, us thinking creatively. We were very creative during that time. We had lots of ideas about different products, but this was the one we kept coming back to. And we, started talking to more people. We also love meeting people when we travel. So we just started talking to other travelers. And we were like, what do you guys do? And we just kept hearing over and over that other people, especially other couples who were traveling together, also had a similar problem. And we're like, this is strange. Is it just the people that we're meeting because we're traveling?
Yeah.
When we went back to the US, started just asking more people. Same thing over and over. It's hard to plan and invest when you're working with a partner and you're trying to figure out how to do it together. And so oftentimes what ends up happening is one person who knows a little bit more ends up taking more of the lead. And then one person feels like, oh, you're so much more like advanced and ahead that they take actually almost like a step back. And we were like, like I actually think the healthiest partnership is you can still have a lead. You can still have someone who does like a little bit more, still have someone who's like a little bit more of like, okay, you're explaining it to me. But we're like, what would it look like if people felt like they were more on the same page? And it wasn't like one person does everything, one person isn't involved at all.
And then you consolidated it into a platform, into an app.
Exactly.
Which helps couples navigate what that actually looks like.
Yes.
And then also execute on that. Okay,
Yes,
I know.
exactly.
As you were sharing that story, I felt so seen. I'm like looking at Anton like, remember when we traveled for 5 weeks in India and Europe? And then, I mean, we were sharing the story before we started recording, but I will reshare. But we, you know, about 2 days into our travels in India, we realized like, ooh, neither of us know how much money is being spent. I'm just spending, you know, 1 minute I'm buying a painting for our friends in our house, and the next minute Anton's getting a suit fitted, and I'm just like, oh God, like, what is happening? And then no one knows how much money we're spending on food. And so, but it only took us, you know, at least it took us only 2 days to realize that. And then you did it on a napkin. We did it just like on our bedroom, like our bed in the hotel that we were at. We just like dumped all of what money we had, what cash, what rupees and coins and cards and what we were willing. And we had to map it out just like right then and there. But oh man, how nice would it have been to have gone into that trip with a little planning, right? And I also think that maybe culturally with a couple and two people working, it can sometimes almost just be like oh, I get this, and then you get this, and then you get, and then you never really know how much all of that adds up. But there are many, many challenging wealth management elements of being in a couple.
And the stress adds up even more, especially now with rising house prices and still like student loans. And now you're trying to figure out, how much does a baby cost? I heard that costs a lot of money, but surely I don't need that all up in the first year.
Right.
So then how do I, plan for the baby, but can we afford a house, and how much do we need? And oh my gosh, weddings are really expensive nowadays.
Yeah. Well,
and you're trying to figure it out all at once.
Right. And then it's like, I mean, a bank doesn't really do anything for you unless you get unless you get legally married. And then all that happens is like your accounts are now joined.
And what we've actually found is that increasingly a lot of couples, especially these dual income, dual career couples, they don't want to only have joint accounts. The default actually is that they still have some things that are independent. Some couples are like, 20% of roughly what we have, we keep separate. Sometimes that's actually 80%, only 20% is joint. But actually the default now has changed. Whereas 20 years ago, the default was that everything is fully joint.
Yeah. Okay, so like I feel like Plenty is a blend of many things. I feel like it is a fintech application, but it's like deeply in the wealth management space, but also you have a CFP background, and so there's this like financial advice element, and that could probably be pretty disruptive to the financial advisory business and space. Given I feel like that's, even just in my partnership, that's one of the things where I'm like, should we get a financial advisor now? Like, is it time? Ugh, those are expensive. I don't want to do that. So I guess if like someone was just wanting to get started with Plenty, I could use us for an example. Anton's like, no, it's gonna be okay. And so imagine us. We're like, you could call us Henrys. Yeah. We're just getting our money right. What is like one of the first, I guess maybe financially we're hoping to get to a place where we're like, where we feel comfortable to maybe take that next step, like get married or whatever. Don't worry, he hasn't proposed yet. Don't worry, Mom. But anyways, this is all hypothetical.
Yes. So you mean in terms of onboarding to the product and what that experience is like?
Yeah. Like what would then, so I found Plenty and I want help. Like what's the next, like what's that look like?
So the first thing we do is we ask, what are your goals? And these could just be as simple as, I want to start saving, because our savings account currently is a cash management product that offers 4.86%, which is pretty much one of the highest that we've seen in the market. And so you can start saving and get that rate. Or maybe you're like, oh, I want to start investing. We also have a more advanced part of how we thought about all the financial products we want to offer is really look at what wealth managers offer to their clients that, everyday households, everyday individuals might not have access to. and remove the question of, oh, I want access, but I can't get it. And so what we want to do is not just bring access, but make it so easy to get onboarded into using these products that it was as simple as, 1 or 2 button clicks. And so you also have the option where you say start investing. Now, maybe for couples, a lot of times when they come to us and when they even have the term financial planning come up in their minds, that's usually because they're like, oh, we actually know when we roughly want to buy a house. Can we afford it? How much do we need to put aside? How much are houses even? Or they're like, oh, wait, and we also, want to plan a wedding. How much are weddings nowadays? I know, my mom said she's going to help with this much, but then how much is the total? And so oftentimes a lot of couples are like, well, independently, I have these goals. Together, we also have these goals. And the way that we map it into the product is you can say this is a shared goal that we have. You can also say this is a personal goal. So personal means that is something that's yours, but your partner can see it. Or maybe you're like, this is a private goal and it's just for me and my partner can't see it.
Okay.
So we have these different ways of setting up the permissions for these goals.
Cool.
And then once you go into the product, we get you into these products really easily by saying, hey, actually, we fully automated the process of getting you into an investment portfolio. And we actually, based on your goal, based on your profile, we've already made a recommendation of where to put your money. And maybe you're like, oh, that sounds great. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
So truly it's just 2 more button clicks and then you're able to confirm how much money you'd like to put aside per month. We also make a recommendation though. So for example, if you are going through a home down payment goal and you're like, I don't know how much a house costs, which is what most people actually generally say, then we pull in a bunch of Zillow data and we'll say, okay, well, the average 2-bedroom in New York costs this much. The average down payment is this much. And then that means you need to put aside, and if you tell us a time frame you'd like to buy this by, then we tell you between you and your partner, you need to put aside $1,200 per month. And maybe you're like, ooh, one person earns more than the other. So maybe you two decide, like maybe one person puts in a little bit more than the other person. Or maybe you're like, oh, we'll split that down the middle. So we make it really easy because we help you estimate the goal amount, how much you need to actually be putting aside every 2 weeks or every month. And then you guys can figure out how you divvy up that amount between the 2 of you.
Okay.
And then you also, the last part of it is,
tell me
so then the last part too that we hear so often from couples is, I want to have one place to see everything.
Yeah.
So the same permissioning system, we basically say connect as many accounts as you'd like. And we will also give you the ability to say, this is private, this is personal, my partner can see it, or this is shared. Whether it is legally shared or not doesn't matter. We just put that layer on top so you can always see everything in one place.
Wow. And does a human get involved at all, maybe by request or no? Or is that something maybe planning for the future?
So right now we have humans from a support perspective. So if you have questions, like it's not just fully automated there. You definitely are talking to an individual. If you have a more complicated question, you can also hop on the phone. It is something that we're looking and considering layering in more in the future, because we do know that especially when you go through even bigger life milestones, like you have your kid or, you have this inheritance now. So oftentimes because there's such a big change, it is helpful. And so that's something that we're thinking about further down the road, especially as we're thinking about supporting couples through more stages of their relationship as well. Wow. I'm like, did you hear that? Should we? Anyway. And so how is it accessible? Anyone? Is it free? Talk about that part, and then we can talk about how you make money. Yeah, great question. So right now, we do have a wait list. We're trying to bring on as many people as quickly as possible, but we might have an early access link for you, Nicole. Okay. Yeah, but we do right now have a wait list. So we do bring people on through that and looking to basically be scaling out that more rapidly over this year.
Okay, nice. And then, yes, tell me about how it's waitlisted, but it is, a free platform application.
So there's
a fee, or tell me about that.
Yeah. So right now, if you use the product on your own, it's $150 per year for the membership. If you and your partner both want to use it together, it's $100 per person for the membership. And then on top of that, we want to be as transparent as possible. So when we offer that 4.86% savings or cash management product, we do take a 0.2% fee. So most banks actually don't disclose how much they make on that. We are very public about that, because then with the federal funds rate, if it increases, your rate automatically increases as well. And so you don't ever have to worry that there might be a delay or anything like that. And then when you invest with us, we do charge a 0.4% fee, but we do believe that for many of the households, many of the individuals that are using the product, because we do a much more advanced version of tax loss harvesting, most people more than make back that fee through the higher after tax returns from that product.
Okay. Wow. And what is, I guess, the I was gonna say, when is like the estimated time of when you hope to release this wait list or let people start to get onboarded?
So we are onboarding people every week
currently.
now.
Every week. Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, we have onboarding groups coming in every week.
Okay, nice. How many people will you kind of start with before you start making like tweaks or starting to get kind of this first wave of users in and for feedback?
So actually the way that our team works is we iterate very quickly. So actually we have 2 onboarding groups per week. And actually, we have one at the beginning of the week, we have one at the end of the week. And then we also, in between those 2 sprints, we actually do a polish round in between. So every time, twice a week, we're actually polishing the product further and further. So it's just getting like cleaner and cleaner, also trying to pull in all the feedback.
Nice. Yeah. No, I love asking that question just because, I mean, you've been in the space. You'd be surprised how many times people just want to continue to like shell out a product that they don't actually get any feedback from the people that it's actually impacting, right? Or the problem is actually impacting. And so I find that kind of silly when people are like this. But anyways.
And I think especially actually to go full circle to the beginning of our conversation, some of the most common things that we've gotten as questions is, what does return mean? What is APY? What are all these different terms? Like, how do I understand this? And so actually a big part of the polish rounds too is layering in more educational information everywhere where there is someone or multiple people who was like, oh, this is unclear. What is, like, I don't understand this. Then we basically put in, an info bubble or put in some additional educational material or write a blog post actually even in the most, deep dive versions where we're layering in educational aspects as we're hearing like what people don't understand right out the gate, because we want to be able to support people whether they are understand all the terms and, like what they're getting right out the gate, or if people are like, oh, maybe it's the first time I'm investing, or I've only ever invested through a 401k now, and now I'm starting to think about maybe I just got a new promotion, and now I'm trying to think about what should I do to properly set myself up. Well,
and I think it's important to put that out there, even for, like I said, also at the top, even for people who are in the industry, right? Like even for like my listeners who are in fintech and working in different spaces, but managing your money is very, very different, or getting your money right is incredibly important, especially as women working in the space, because it helps us keep working in the space. It helps us level up, and then helps us get to those leadership positions, and helps us build companies and all of that good stuff. So always important to get your money right. Well, Emily, I want to ask you my final question, which is, if we need to be the change that we wish to see in the world, what changes do you wish to see in fintech, and how do you embody it?
I'd really say that if I were to zoom out to consumer trends, even beyond, fintech, it felt like a big part of, call it like the last 50 years, was actually a lot of drive towards almost this like big box store, department store concepts where actually there's not that much that is unique. And it's actually more about bulk, and it's all in one place. And I think you lose so much of what makes us as humans, like humans of fintech, special and unique. And I think a big part of actually how that is reflected in fintech too is, I think money is deeply personal. And and I think if you look at some of the old school companies like the Vanguards and Schwabs and Fidelities of the world, they've helped a lot of people, but the people who are there, the people they help, often look very similarly. And I think the products reflect that, and the way the products are delivered reflect that. a huge part of what we've thought a lot about is right now we're starting with couples, but so many of the people where I think there's the greatest opportunity to support them actually are people who they come from family backgrounds where they didn't talk a lot about money, and they might not have ever had a financial planner that worked with their parents in the family. So they're really the first generations coming into this, and now they're trying to figure out a lot without the traditional support of being able to go ask your parents what to do or their financial planners. And so I also think what we've seen is typically from other racial and cultural backgrounds, the way money works is also very interknit within families. And so a big part of how we've thought about the multiplayer functionality is that it can extend far beyond just two individuals to the kids, to the parents who you're also helping with financial decisions with. And that's how we think a lot more about the future of this. But ultimately, that's because we think in the fintech industry, there's a lot more room for really listening to what people are already doing, what families are doing, how they behave, what's important, their values, and then building towards that. Instead of trying to smack something on top and just be like, you should just take this because this is what we think is right, instead of really listening to the customers.
Correct. I mean, that's all I'm trying to get people to see and do more of. And it's what makes me, cringe when anyone says like consumer fintech's dead just because funding's down a little bit in a year compared to the craziness of 2021 and 2022. And it's just like, what are you talking about? We are still in a place where someone making $100,000 a year lives paycheck to paycheck. We're still at a place where, the average American can't pay a $400 emergency expense. We're still at a place where couples don't have the opportunity or education, and especially couples that come from backgrounds whose parents did not really talk about money or didn't really educate them, or, one piece of financial advice was save, right?
Yes.
Like, I've got an immigrant mom from the Philippines. That was the advice. End of discussion. And it's like, love you, Mom, but man, that wasn't enough. I needed more.
And that's reflected if you look at, there's been a series of nonprofits and think tanks that have done so much research about, especially if you come from immigrant families, how even if you were earning more income, you can still have materially less wealth built up because you're not investing. Saving, great advice in the abstract, in actuality, in the dollars and cents.
Well, you're actually in the long term. Literally losing money in the long term. And I know, I mean, it's a part of what makes me thankful for fintech companies and just being in this industry in general is because I've gotten to learn, right, from covering this space, the what creating generational wealth can look like, and I'm in your boat here of like, I'm someone that's trying to create that generational wealth for the first time. Like, I'm the one stepping into that space, and I couldn't agree more that there's just still so much room for fintech to actually help people and what they need and what they're already doing, and then using technology as the enabler. It's why behavioral finance is also so important. And I feel like you're using so much of that for Plenty, and I can't wait to see how it goes, what is in store for it, and maybe I'll get on the wait list, and get off of it at some point. So
excited to bring you and Antoine onto the product.
Oh yes, I know. Did you hear that? He's dying laughing. Anyways, Emily, thank you so much for joining us, and we are gonna wrap that up.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. Woohoo! Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. To hear our next story from another diverse leader, be sure to tune in next week. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our show and give it a 5-star rating, as it helps our message reach more people who want to find belonging too. Thanks for tuning in.